Welcome to Just a Minute. Thank you. Hello. My name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure to welcome our many listeners in this country and throughout the world, and also to welcome the four distinctive and individual players of the game who have joined me for this particular edition. We welcome back, on my right, that master of improvised comedy, Paul Merton, and beside him, a master of the witty comment, that is Clement Freud, and on my left, the master of the outrageous remark, that is Graham Norton, and being completely politically correct, I must say, and I say, the mistress of stand-up comedy, Linda Smith. Would you please welcome all four of them? And as usual, I am going to ask them to speak on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Beside me sits Janet Staplehurst, and she's going to help me keep the score and blow a whistle when the 60 seconds are up. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the City Hall in that great city of Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England. And we are part of the Newcastle Comedy Festival. And in front of us here in this fine hall, we have a real Geordie audience ready to cheer us on our way as we begin the show this week with Paul Merton, and the subject, Paul, Narcissus. Tell us something about Narcissus in this game, starting now.
Well, he was Greek, and he rather liked the look of his own reflection. He would get up in the morning, have a shave, and stand there in front of the mirror until it was time to go to bed. One day he was walking past a lake, and he looked into the water, and he thought, I am so beautiful. And he stared into the H2O, and he thought, I am so wonderful, I shall look at myself forever.
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition.
Of what?
I am so.
Yes, I'm afraid. It's a tough game. Clement, that is a correct challenge. So you take over the subject of Narcissus, and there are 40 seconds starting now.
I've always been rather jealous of Narcissus because he admired his own image in a lake. And when I stand near water and look down, all I see is my stomach. Narcissus was an extremely good chap, called after a flower which has a large corona. Nicholas would know what that
Paul
is.
Merton challenge.
Hesitation.
There was a hesitation, yes. He was going to the world of horticulture, and got slightly confused. Right. So, Paul, you've got the subject back. You've got a point for a correct challenge, and there are 19 seconds available. Narcissus starting now.
Of course it was his undoing, because he considered himself so beautiful that in the end he couldn't eat.
Clement Freud challenge.
He's been beautiful before.
Yes, when you were talking before. Your first go, you talked about being beautiful. So, 14 seconds available for Clement Freud, having got another point. Narcissus starting now.
Florally, a narcissus is daffodil-like. You can go to Cornwall and get jonquils, which are not unlike narcissi, which is the plural of narcissus, a word I can use again because it was...
In this game, whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains an extra point. On this occasion was Clement Freud, and at the end of that round you naturally have assumed and understood that he has got a commanding lead over all the others. Paul Merton's got one, Linda and Graham have yet to speak, but Linda Smith, will you take the next subject? It's things to do with an egg. Tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now.
Things to do with an egg. I can see the virile men of Newcastle thinking, easy, things to do with an egg, you fertilise it. That's what you do with an egg, whether it's human or ostrich or platypus or chicken. They just...
Paul's challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
Trying to fertilise an ostrich egg.
Well, another ostrich can do that quite easily.
But not the men of Newcastle.
I don't know,
but I don't think she was conveying she wanted all these men of Newcastle to rush out and fertilise ostriches all over. There aren't many ostriches in Newcastle to fertilise anyway.
It's not a bad idea, is it? An ostrich is black and white, Newcastle fan, obviously. And if you had their long legs, you could see at the match better.
You'd have to hold on for grim death if by the time the way they move across the desert.
About it, would you?
Oh, yes.
You've obviously thought it through, Nicholas.
Do you know that an ostrich egg is extremely hard and solid, and it's very... I don't know how they ever get them through the part of the anatomy they come from. But you can buy them. They sell them in South Africa. I've got a friend who's now done a deal with Harrods. And you can get enough for... You can get enough from the centre of an ostrich egg...
Now.
No. They're interested. You can get enough... Paul, it was not a correct challenge because he wasn't deviating from things to do with an egg. So, Linda, you keep the subject, you get a point for an incorrect challenge. You have 47 seconds to continue, starting now.
Now, Delia Smith has lots to do with an egg. In fact, she built an entire TV show around a pan of boiling water and an egg. Riveting entertainment it was too. Much better than walking with dinosaurs, I'm sure you'll agree. Other things you can do with an egg, they may be served in various ways, which include poached, fried, scrambled, boiled, hard or soft, souffled, omeleted, roast, stewed.
You had to err eventually when you went through your list, but well done, Linda. But Graham, you came in, yes, we call it hesitation, and you have a correct challenge. A point to Graham Norton, and 19 seconds available for him to tell us something about things to do with an egg. Starting now.
Things to do with an egg. Well, really, you can do anything you like with an egg. You can build a house out of eggs if you want to. Sadly, it will be messy and smell after a while. But you could. The one thing...
Paul Merton challenge.
Deviation. I don't think you could build a house out of eggs.
You could. It would be smelly and messy, though.
No, it would be smelly and messy, but it wouldn't be a house.
No. I don't think it would be a habitable residence,
No.
Graham. I do think that what
I
Stevie...
pointed that out.
I'll tell you what I'll do.
Nicholas.
Occasionally when I... Yes, what do you want to say, Clement?
You did say things you can do with an egg.
Yes.
That's what I meant for what is an egg but a home for a small chicklet.
In this situation, somebody has to have the benefit of the doubt. I've decided to give it to Graham Norton so he can... Oh, you've got friends in Newcastle. And you've got 8 seconds as well to carry on with things to do...
That'll be long enough.
Things to do with an egg, starting now.
Oh, sorry.
And Linda's challenge. Linda, you challenged.
Did I?
Yes, you did. Your light came on.
I'm sorry, it was a phantom challenge.
So if you decide you didn't challenge, Graham was interrupted. He gets another point. He keeps the subject. There are 6 seconds. Things to do with an egg, starting now.
Don't go to work on an egg, because people at the office will laugh at the funny stain.
Paul,
That's
challenge.
rich talk coming from somebody who says you can build a house with eggs.
So your challenge, Paul. Deviation?
Oh, does it matter? Deviation.
Right, well, it's deviation from what he was saying before, so I give you the benefit of the doubt on this occasion and say, Paul, you have half a second. Starting now.
I'll never forget a day I first...
Paul Merton, then speaking as a whistle when gain the extra point. And Clement Freud, you take the next round, please. The subject is serendipity. Tell us something about serendipity in just a minute, starting now.
It is very serendipitous to move house, even if you previously lived in one built of eggs. We recently transferred our address from one part of London to another of that same city, and the extraordinary thing of leaving the previous establishment in which we resided and picking up things about which we had entirely forgotten, like my first wife Gladys, who appeared in a cupboard under the stairs, pictures of enormous wealth, cutlery, crockery, glassware, pictures. I said pictures, but...
Paul Challenge.
Honesty.
The repetition of picture. 17 seconds for you, Paul, on serendipity, starting now.
I think one of the most interesting aspects of the word serendipity that I've been given 17 seconds to talk about is that if you were to ask me seriously, in all honesty, I would have to tell you I have no idea what it means. Hopefully that apology, which I convey to you now, will be enough to get you...
Paul Merton's honesty kept him going till the whistle went, and Paul, it's your turn to begin. The subject, taking coals to Newcastle. Have 60 seconds on that subject, starting now.
It's a phrase meaning taking coals to Newcastle. If an area is particularly rich in a kind of product, then you would be ill-advised to take that self-same stuff to that place. It's like Clement Freud going to Disneyland. There would be a contradiction. So much happiness and gaiety in the air, it would be a mistake for him to even bother to attend that particular one in Europe, of course. There's one in Paris, and you can go to Florida and other places in America.
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of places.
Yes, you did have too many places.
Did I?
Yes, so Clement has another point. He has the subject. He has 30 seconds. He has taking coals to Newcastle, starting now.
If Stephanie Coles were to say to me, please take me on holiday, there is nowhere I would sooner convey her than to Newcastle under Lyme. A great town in the potteries, not far from Stoke, about which good books have been written, like Anna of the 5 Towns. I have to spell it because I've said it before. Newcastle, in the northeast of England, is a town...
So Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so. He's moved forward. He's still in second place, just ahead of Graham Norton, and Linda Smith behind Graham, and in the lead still Paul Merton. But Linda, your turn to begin. The subject, B-movies. Tell us something about that great genre, starting now.
B-movies. I love B-movies. My favourite B-movie of all is The Swarm with Michael Caine. It's marvellous. I love that bit where he says, but the bees have always been our friends. That's hilarious. It makes me laugh so much. I went to see another film called The Spirit of the Beehive, expecting it to be a B-movie, but of course it was rather disappointing because it was an arty Spanish film that was about fascism and Frankenstein. So, a bit of a disappointment. Likewise disappointing was The Taste of Honey. Rita Tushingham is quite unusual looking, but she's not actually a bee. However, a very good film I could recommend to B-movie lovers would be The Third Bee by Orson Welles, the story of corruption and thrillers and love in post-war Germany, where Joseph...
Paul Merton challenge.
Well, there's no such film as The Third Bee.
No, there isn't.
The third man's based in Vienna.
So, Paul, 11 seconds. You tell us something about B-movies, starting now.
There's a great many great films.
You get the
That must be a
subject.
record.
Graham, you came in first with your buzzer there, and there are 8 seconds. You tell us something about B-movies, starting now.
B-movie is a phrase meaning any film or motion picture containing Kevin Costner. You know, it's not going to be very good.
And Graham Norton speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point. He's now moved into second place behind Paul Merton. And the irony of this game is when you consider that Linda Smith went for 43 seconds on that subject, did all the work, didn't get any points at all in that round. And the others coming in at the end got
It's
the
her
points.
fault for talking rubbish.
I thought it was lovely rubbish anyway, but that's but it was the contribution, the points are secondary. Graham Norton, it's your turn to begin. The subject, split infinitives. Tell us something about that particular subject in this game, starting now.
Split infinitives are wrong. We all know that. Infinitives should be together, but due to the pressures of modern English grammar, so many of them split up. There's a group for split infinitives called SPLIM. It stands for Split Infinitive Management. They meet and have little agendas. They might have at the top of that piece of paper, item 1. Graham Norton's talking, it's about on the radio. Does he know what we are? I'm there. I defend myself, of course I do. To explain would be to patronise the lovely people of Newcastle, who all do understand what a split infinitive is. So I won't go on about them in a technical way at all. Oh, thank God.
To talk for 53 seconds. about something you didn't really know what it was all about. It was really a great achievement.
I know.
And you won't get... And Linda's got in with a correct challenge. What is your challenge, by the way? Let's make sure I agree with it.
General exhaustion.
Oh, right.
A sympathy buzz.
Having him for hesitation, are you?
Yes, I think so.
Right, all right. Well, he's done all the hard work. You get the point, and you've got 7 seconds. Split infinitives starting now.
Split infinitives are to do with grammar. Now, grammar to me is like homosexuality.
Clement, you buzz first. Everybody spotted the grammar. 3 seconds, split infinitives. Clement, starting now.
I think it's quite wrong to say that split infinitives are not useful. They are...
So at the end of that round, Clement Freud, speaking as a whistle when gained another point. He's moved forward. He's just 1 point behind the leader, Paul Merton, then Graham Norton and Linda Smith in that order. And Paul, it's your turn to begin. The subject, woofers and tweeters. That's a good subject. Tell us something about woofers and tweeters in this game, starting now.
Well, of course, they're part of a loudspeaker. The woofers, as the name suggests, carries the bass note. Woof. Is the kind of deep noise that you would expect to get from a woofer. A tweeter, on the other hand, as you would expect to from that very...
rubbish.
It seemed to dribble away.
How dare you?
So you're having for hesitation, yes. 44 seconds for you, Graham, on woofers and tweeters, starting now.
Woofers and Tweeters are a very old firm who supply hi-fi goods to the royal family. A large woofer and tweeters van pulls up outside Buckingham Palace, and the good Queen says, "Hooray! Large things to put in my house and play music on." It is no accident that Buckingham Palace has a large garden.
Clement Shalit.
Just thought I'd challenge.
What is your challenge?
I don't know.
Well, he did actually repeat Buckingham Palace, but
Well,
it's
that's
too late
really
now.
what
Yes,
I
no,
thought,
no.
but
Oh, that's fair enough.
No, it's too late now. He said he didn't have a challenge.
No, he does. Buckingham Palace has said it twice.
Clement, you have 22 seconds. Tell us something about woofers and tweeters, starting now.
Woofers and tweeters, to those of us who don't have hi-fi, in which I would include myself, are dogs and birds, very nice things to have about the house. A woofer is simply a canine who says woof, whereas a tweeter is something that flies and goes tweet. Woofers and tweeters are exactly what you should give your godchildren for Christmas.
Clement Freud was speaking again as the whistle went. He's now just 1 ahead of Paul Merton, then Graham Norton, Linda Smith in that order. Linda, your turn to begin. We're up in Newcastle, the home of brown ale. We'll talk about it. 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Brown ale, the champagne of the north. The fuel of this great city that we find ourselves in. I have never drunk brown ale, but I believe it's a very useful commodity to have about you if you want to get completely out of your head for £3.50. Now, brown ale is unfortunately...
Paul Merton challenge.
A hesitation.
There was a hesitation, I'm afraid, yes.
Sadly.
So, brown ale's with you, Paul. 43 seconds available, starting now.
Well, as Linda says, it's probably more of a northern drink than a southern drink. I think I have...
Clement Freud challenge.
Drink.
2 drinks.
Buckingham Palace.
Clement, you had a correct challenge. 37 seconds, brown ale, starting now.
In Suffolk, we have a very good brown ale, which is brewed by Adnams, and is called Broadside, which can't be very
Paul
interesting to
Merton
anyone here.
It's a hesitation.
That was a hesitation, Paul, yes? You
I
have
waited
29
for applause.
Don't indulge him, please. You didn't deserve anything, and he didn't get anything.
Well, don't rub it in.
29 seconds on brown ale with you, Paul, starting now.
My sister Angela was in the Brownies and used to come back and tell me all about brown owl and the various things that have been get up to in the woods, looking for pixies and elves and goblins and fairies at the bottom of the garden.
Linda challenge.
Deviation, I think.
Why?
She liked a brown owl, did brown owl?
She liked a brown ale, but she was in fact brown owl, so it's a different subject.
Well,
Fairies, pixies?
No, it was a very strange branch of the Brownies. There was a beer.
They could, for all
was
I
in
know...
charge of them.
No, I could, for all I know, in that branch of the Brownies, had a brown ale. We don't know. I don't know. You don't know.
Well, by the same token, you could have a house of eggs.
All right, I'll put it to the audience. You can be the final judge on this one. I have to make these decisions. If you agree with Linda's challenge, you can boo for Linda, and if you disagree, you can cheer for Paul, and you all do it together now.
And suddenly, it was no longer a show, it was a rally.
Right. Linda, you have the subject. It's brown ale. Back with you. You started with it. You got it back at last. 16 seconds starting now.
Brown ale, sadly these days, is not a fashionable drink, but perhaps it's now so unfashionable that it's acquired retro chic and will suddenly become trendy again. Hopefully other traditional products of the North, such as steel and shipbuilding and manufacturing...
So Linda Smith was speaking as the whistle went and gained that audience endorsement for her comments and has moved forward rapidly, but not enough to move out of fourth place, unfortunately. And Graham Norton, it's your turn to begin. And the subject is holding my breath. You look as if you're doing it now, but will you talk on the subject? 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
During some parts of my life, holding my breath is a skill I've tried to improve. But I'm still not that good at it. Think what you will. I remember as a child, though, thinking... Oh, I said thinking twice.
Paul Merton challenge.
Unfortunately, said thinking twice.
And he did say thinking twice, and he admitted his downfall. And 44 seconds for you, Paul. Tell us something about holding my breath, starting now.
This is how you hold your breath for 44 seconds.
Clement Freud was the first to challenge.
Hesitation,
yes. 41 seconds, you tell us something about holding my breath, starting now.
I've always believed that halitosis was better than having no breath at all. And people who suffer from that debilitating disease, or affliction would perhaps be a better name for it, tend not to breathe in order not to offend...
Paul
or you can't challenge on not.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
So, Paul, another correct challenge. Holding my breath, 24 seconds, starting now.
It was a game that I used to play when I...
Clement Freud.
Repetition.
Of what?
Words. Just one after another.
It's a clever idea, Clement, but... all right, give Clement a bonus point. He obviously wants it, and... Paul was interrupted, so he gets a point for interruption. He keeps the subject. 22 seconds, holding my breath, Paul, starting now.
I remember when I had my first swimming lesson. It was at Sutton Baths, and the teacher there insisted that we dive in at the deep end, stay on the bottom as long as possible, holding our breath. There was one boy who was particularly good at it. He's still down there, in fact, and that was in 1968. So it just goes to show that if you've got real dedication, you can succeed in holding your breath longer than you possibly thought.
Paul Merton, then speaking as a whistle when gained the extra point. And Clement Freud, you take the next round, please. The subject is out-of-body experiences. Oh, my... It depends on the body, really, doesn't it? Anyway, 60 seconds as usual, Clement, starting now.
Out-of-body experiences. There is, in my body, a thin man who's been trying to get out for many years now. He is about 11 stone. Has lots of hair, more teeth than I, and ears which protrude, unfortunately. But this chap who occupies...
What's your chance?
Well, we're not expected to listen to this, are we? He's got a man inside him who's got protruding ears.
Is that why he can't get out?
I think it's very devious from out-of-body experiences, but...
He's 11 stone?
Paul, I agree with you. You have a point, of course.
What's his challenge?
Deviation from out-of-body experiences. That's a fantasy you have about somebody inside your body.
I mean, it's a fantasy we all share, that inside us we have an 11 stone man.
That's right, yes. I would call...
Some more than others, perhaps.
Might be described more as an
Linda.
in-body experience, really.
I think
Paul.
we ought to exclude Linda from that generalisation.
Right, I'm
If
giving
you
the...
insist.
I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to Paul and say you have 33 seconds on out-of-body experiences, Paul, starting now.
I've only ever vomited on alcohol once, and that was about 3 days before I got married. I went on my stag night, and it's a traditional thing to do. A bunch of men go out together, and I drank a lot of beer. I seem to remember Brown Ale was one of them. And I was sick all over...
Graham Norton challenge.
A woman shouldn't be at a stag night. Brown ale, do you see?
Graham, a lovely idea, a lovely thought, a lovely interruption. We give you a bonus point because we enjoyed it so much.
Boggle, get off.
Paul was interrupted, so he gets a point for that. He keeps the subject. 19 seconds available. Out-of-body experiences, Paul, starting now.
There is a phenomenon which some people believe in that's called astral travel, where you can travel or... I had to try and make up a word.
Clement, you got in first. Yes, he couldn't get another word out for travel, so you got him with 12 seconds to go on the subject of out-of-body experiences, starting now.
The body that I would most like to out of experience has,
I think hesitation.
You're right, yes. His body was getting very clogged up there, wasn't it? Right. So, Linda, we're all going to hear from everybody on this subject. That's good, because it's the last one. It's the last round. And, Linda, you have 6 seconds to tell us something about out-of-body experiences, starting now.
I have never had an out-of-body experience, but I did once open a tin of Tizer and lemonade came out. Now you try explaining that.
So Linda Smith speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point and has moved forward. And I said just a minute ago there was no more time to play just a minute, so let me give you the final situation. Linda, who contributed so much, did unfortunately finish in 4th place, but only just behind Graham Norton, whose contribution was equally exciting and delightful. And just ahead of him was Clement Freud, but 1 point, only 1 point, separated him from Paul Merton. So, Paul, we say this week, you're the winner. Well, it only remains for me to say thank you to these 4 excellent and extravagant players of the game. Paul Merton, Graham Norton, Linda Smith, Clement Freud. I also must thank Janet Staplehurst, who's been helping with the score, blowing her whistle. We must thank the creator of the game, Ian Messiter, and of course our producer and director, Chris Neal. I also want to thank this lovely Geordie audience here in Newcastle upon Tyne, who've come from all parts of the north to cheer us on our way. You've been fantastic. We've loved being here. I tell you what, would you like us to come back again? From all on the panel, from me, Nicholas Parsons, and from this lovely audience, goodbye. Tune in next time we play Just a Minute. Welcome to Just a Minute. Thank you. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away once more, it is my pleasure to welcome our many listeners throughout the world, but also to welcome our 4 talented players of the game. We have the clever humour of Paul Merton, the erudite humour of Clement Freud, the outrageous humour of Graham Norton, and the feminine humour of Linda Smith. Will you please welcome all 4 of them? So what a wonderful combination to play the show this week. Beside me sits Janet Staplehurst, who's going to help me keep the score and blow a whistle when the 60 seconds are up. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the City Hall in Newcastle upon Tyne. And we are here as part of the Newcastle Comedy Festival. And in front of us, we have an exciting, hyped-up, truly Geordie audience who are going to cheer us on our way. Is that right? And we're going to begin this edition of Just a Minute with Linda Smith. And Linda, the subject is the Angel of the North. That strikes a chord with some of them here, but for those who don't know, tell us something about that subject in this game, Linda, starting now.
The Angel of the North is a huge statue with arms outstretched, possibly in welcome, possibly like a boastful fisherman.
Now, that's never happened in just a minute before. I have to explain, I have lights in front of me, and 2 lights came on, and they both stayed on.
Oh, well, that cancels them both out then, doesn't it?
Yes.
So, otherwise, we're going into the realms of antimatter and, you know...
Right, Linda, I've taken your decision on that. Thank you very much for reinterpreting the rules. And so, Linda, no points are scored. You have the Angel of the North still the subject. 52 seconds available, starting now.
Oh, come on, I was breathing.
I know,
If
but...
breathing's hesitation, then that does disadvantage all the mammals on the panel, doesn't it? I think perhaps we should have aqua lungs to give us a level playing field.
I always give that pause, you know when the now is coming. So, Linda, you unfortunately didn't take your breath in time. Merton, that was the correct challenge of hesitation, so you have a point for that. You take over the subject, and it is the Angel of the North. There are 50 seconds available, starting now.
It is a rather stunning structure. I think it's somewhere near Gateshead. I'm not quite sure. Nobody seems to be arguing with me, so it must be. I am very familiar with this statue. It is a wonderful piece of work. It is rather like...
Linda Smith challenge.
Hesitation,
There was an yes, that's
I was
interpretation.
breathing.
Linda, you have a correct challenge. You've got the subject back again. You have 36 seconds. The Angel of the North starting now.
One thing's for certain about the Angel of the North. It is definitely northern because it's out there day and night in all weathers, freezing cold, and it hasn't got a coat. In fact, not even a T-shirt. How northern can you get? This was a trait that used to astonish me when I lived in the North and...
Clement Freud, your challenge.
Good question.
Linda, it was an incorrect challenge. You have another point for that. You have the Angel of the North, and there are 11 seconds available, starting now.
I think the arms of this giant...
Clement challenge.
She's had a think before.
You did have a think before. And so that was... well, listen, Clement, 9 seconds for you.
I must say, the panto season kicks in early here. Well, if I don't get to finish this one, I'll have to sell Daisy the cow.
9 seconds available. The Angel of the North, Clement, starting now.
The Angel of the North email address is allyefaithful.com. If you live in London, the Angel of the North...
In this game, whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains an extra point. On this occasion, it was Clement Freud, and at the end of that round, you won't be surprised to know that he's in a strong lead. He's actually, strong lead, 1 ahead of Linda Smith, and 2 ahead of Paul Merton, and Graham Norton has yet to speak, but he's going to talk now, because he takes the next subject, which is security. Graham, tell us something about that in this game, starting now.
We must live in a crime-ridden society. I've noticed as I've trawled my way around the land that come a certain hour, even public toilets are locked. Why? Are they afraid that someone might break in and clean them? Doesn't make sense to me. I've had to put a burglar alarm on my house. Well, obviously, I didn't do it myself. I had somebody in. But I do have this thing on the house. And you have to...
Paul's light came on first, yes.
A repetition of on the house.
Yes, on the house. Right. 23 seconds, Paul. Another correct challenge and a point to you, and security is with you, starting now.
There's been a curious trend at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival that has developed over the last 4 or 5 years, where comedians have had to employ security men to escort them around that particular town. And I always think it's probably a bad sign if a comic needs to have somebody...
Clement Freud challenge. Yes, I agree with that, Clement. You have the subject, you have security, you have 4 seconds, and you start now.
I have been particularly asked not to speak about security.
Clement Freud was again speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point and has decreased his lead at the end of the round. And Clement, it's your turn to begin. The subject, babysitting. Tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now.
I think the most useful thing when you are babysitting is a playpen in which you sit, and the children can do whatever they like, but they can't get near you or touch you, and you are unable to change their nappies, which I think has always been a hugely overrated occupation. Babysitting, when you have as many grandchildren as I do, is something which is getting increasingly easy to refuse to do. Will you come over, say, my sons and daughters?
Paul challenged.
Hesitation.
I think so, Paul, yes?
For a moment there, he couldn't remember who was asking him to babysit.
You're right. 25 seconds are available, and you take over babysitting starting now.
Well, it's a very cruel practice, and it shouldn't really be allowed to continue in a civilised society. Men will place bets on how long a baby can be sat on until it cries and wails and makes a terrible noise. The police have been asked in several locations in this area to look at underground babysitting, which has taken off enormously. The poor toddler is placed in a soundproof booth.
Oh, so Paul Merton was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so. He's moved forward, he's in second place. And those devious thoughts, the image you are giving to all our listeners around the world of what happens to babies in Newcastle upon time.
You honestly think people in India are going to go, that sounds interesting, let's go to Newcastle. Sell the cow, let's go to Newcastle. They sit on babies there. Oh, it's probably only a joke. No, he said it on the radio.
Yes. Paul
Phone up
Merton.
your friend in China, he'll probably want to come with us.
Yes. You know, Paul Merton, he's an icon in his country. It must be true. Right.
Johannesburg? I don't know.
Yes. Anyway. Graham, your turn to begin. Smart Alec. That is the subject. Tell us something about it in this game, starting now.
Bizarre but true. I knew someone known as Smart Alec, or Smart Alec, as he preferred to be known, because though his father was English, his mother was pretentious. He was a fascinating creature, and was indeed very smart. For it was him who regaled me with this tiny bit of wisdom that I share with you now. Children are a bit like farts, because people quite like their own. I've remembered this for...
Oh, somebody open the window, please.
This proves that theory.
Yeah, Paul, you challenged, actually.
I did. Well, I was thinking about the people in India. I mean... But also, that's not the only resemblance. They also lift the duvet up in the morning.
So what is your challenge?
I don't want people from China coming over here. It's misrepresentation of the British people.
And so that is your challenge,
Yeah.
what, deviation?
Yeah.
No, I don't think he was deviating. He made a point which the audience enjoyed. And I'm not going to repeat what he said because it would...
Be repetition.
It would, yeah. 18 seconds. Smart Alec is with you, Graham, starting now.
Smart Alec comes from a very large family of Alecs, because
Clement, you got in first. Yes, all that. We interpret as hesitation, so Clement, you have 11 seconds on Smart Alec, starting now.
The only Alec I ever knew was Alec Douglas Hume, who was Prime Minister, probably as unsmart an Alec as you will ever find in the world.
Freud speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point and has increased his lead at the end of the round. Paul Merton, it's your turn to begin, and the subject is high heels. Tell us something about high heels in just a minute, starting now.
Recently, I was appearing in a pantomime with Ronnie Corbett, and we were playing Ugly Sisters. And for the role, I needed to wear a 6-inch heel. I can see you looking at me, Nicholas. You've worn high heels, haven't you, at the time?
Yeah. Paul, your challenge.
Yes,
Hesitation?
Yeah, hesitation.
Well done. You listened very well then, didn't you? So that's the correct challenge. So if you challenge yourself, it's correct. I suppose I've got to give it to you. So you get a point for hesitation. You keep the subject. You have 48 seconds. High heels starting now.
They are very uncomfortable to wear, as all the women would know here, I'm sure, or any men that would also have worn these high heels. The heels that I would...
Oh, Graham Norton challenge.
It was a bit hesitation.
It was hesitation. Graham, tell us something about high heels. 38 seconds available, starting now.
High heels were invented by men and sold to beautiful women, saying, "This will make you more gorgeous," when in fact the male of the species was thinking, "Ha ha, oh."
Clement challenge, yes. Tell
Ha-ha
us...
is in the word, ha-ha.
No. So 25 seconds for you, Clement.
25.
Tell us something about...
25.
25 seconds, yes. Do you want to look at the...
I wouldn't have challenged if there'd been that much.
Well, you've got a point, you've got the subject, you've got 25 seconds, you have high heels, well, not personally, but you've got the subject of high heels starting now.
There are shops that pertain...
Paul challenge.
He didn't have 25 seconds.
No, he didn't, did he? No, the 22 seconds now for you, Paul, with high heels starting now.
It does put your foot in a curious position, and the angle of the leg, although it looks quite attractive to the onlooker, it's quite painful.
Oh, Clement challenge.
Repetition of quite.
Yes, there was too many quites, and you have 14 seconds. Tell us something more about high heels, Clement, starting now.
I'm not at all sure why shops that pertain...
Paul challenge.
He's just repeated shops that pertain from last time.
I know. And,
So it's repetition.
10 seconds for you, Paul, on high heels starting now.
The highest pair of heels I've ever seen were worn...
Clement Freud challenge.
He's repeated ever.
No.
Oh, yes.
No.
I didn't hear him say...
Fight.
I didn't hear ever earlier on, so I'm giving the benefit of the doubt on this occasion, you see, to Paul, and say, now you have the subject still, 6 seconds available, high heels starting now.
In the film Tommy, Elton John wears...
Nobody speaks at that pace. You were using a computer-generated voice box to
I
do
know,
that.
but you hyped him up. You said, go on, boys, go on. And you hyped them up, and then
Well, he should learn to walk away.
Right. Well, Linda, we give you a bonus point because we enjoyed the interruption, but he wasn't deviating or doing anything within the rules of just a minute. So, Paul, you have another point for that, for being interrupted, and there's 1 second left on high heels starting now.
The scene where I saw...
Right. So Paul Merton was speaking with a whistle and gained that extra point, and he is now equal in the lead with Clement Freud. You want to know why I wore the high heels? It was in the Rocky Horror Show, because I know some of the audience
Yes,
saw
but
me.
come on, Nicholas, you were only selling chalk ices.
When I played at the Theatre Royal here in Newcastle, they saw me at the end, and
They wanted their money back.
I got some fan letters about the shape of my legs, I can tell you. I didn't know it was a good one before. Let's carry on with just a minute.
Zookeepers.
You're wicked and unkind, and I'm so kind to them. What I came here to suffer, I don't know, but anyway, it's all part of the gifts for the mill, isn't it? I don't know. Absolutely. We'll carry on with just a minute. Clement Freud, it's your turn to begin, and the subject is market. And there are 60 seconds, as always, starting now.
To market, to buy a fat pig.
Paul Merton.
3 twos.
Yes, 3
is
twos
6.
so close together. No.
It's 9.
Where's it?
Is 6. 3
right.
twos.
For the correct challenge, you have market, you have 57 seconds, starting now.
There's a market near to where I live, and it's a market that I used to visit when I was a child as well. Fulham Market in North End Road in the London borough of that name is a wonderful place. I think it's under threat now, as a lot of local markets tend to be, as the supermarket.
Graham challenge.
Was there a repetition of local?
Do you know, I think there was.
I'm just asking.
Well, listen, Graham, correct challenge. 42 seconds for you, Graham, on market, starting now.
Only today I visited a market. It was Brick Lane Market in the East End of London. It isn't very good. There was a person with a stall laid out on a rug. I'm not making this up. And on it were doll heads. In Russia, you would find better class of merchandise than that. Broken radios, half a chair, one knife and a spoon, all priced up, very professional, but nothing you would actually want to buy. That's why they invented the shop.
So Graham Norton, speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point, and his other points. The round has moved forward, but he's still trailing our two leaders, Paul Merton and Clement Freud. And Linda Smith, your turn to begin. And the subject now is dinosaurs. Tell us something about those creatures in this game, starting now.
Dinosaurs have never been so popular as they are now. What a shame that they're dead and can't enjoy it. A bit like Eric and Ernie. Walking with Dinosaurs was an enormously popular hit for the BBC. I've started so often.
I'm laughing.
I must explain to our listeners that Linda Smith is standing beside Graham Norton, and Graham got quite hysterical, and when Graham gets hysterical, the audience get hysterical, and that's why they were all laughing. So he dried you up, and I don't think it was fair, Linda, so I'm going to say...
I've never been accused of that before.
Linda, he dried you up. I'm going to give you a point, actually, because you were interrupted.
I did challenge.
No, but... Yeah, but she was thrown. She was thrown.
I challenged on BBC. Repetition of B.
BBC, yes, that is repetition of B, right, which you did say before you dried up. 42 seconds. Dinosaurs with you, Paul, starting now.
The British Broadcasting Corporation, or to give its initials, the BDITOC, is a wonderful organisation that has been employing us all.
Clement challenge.
Repetition of organisation.
You definitely say organisation.
No.
Right, so, Paul...
You know, I think we should tape this programme and then we could have a chance to listen back.
32 seconds for you, Paul, to continue on Dinosaurs, starting now.
Well, of course, dinosaurs walk the earth. There have been many films made about this particular epoch.
Linda, challenge.
Particular, I think that might have been current in Dickens' times, but since then we've had a state education system.
I think that's been a bit picky, actually. I really do. But, Linda, they enjoy what you said.
Being a bit particular.
He was struggling to get the word out. He didn't really deviate from language the way we understand it too much. So you have a bonus point because the audience enjoyed it. Paul has a point because he was interrupted. He keeps Dinosaurs. 25 seconds available, starting now.
Dinosaurs, of course, are an infliction at Dean Martin.
Clement challenge.
Repetition of course.
You did say of course before.
Well, I'm not surprised. I couldn't say particular. What else am I going to say?
Clement, you got in with 22 seconds on Dinosaurs, starting now.
A dinosaur is, of course, a large extinct animal, and it is believed that dinosaurs laid eggs, which enabled people to make omelets of enormous size. A dinosaur...
Paul, challenge.
Deviation.
I agree with you. I don't think they... I think
You didn't have people and dinosaurs at the same time. That's right.
And they certainly weren't making omelettes in that period.
They didn't know how they could have fire.
No.
They invented fire before they invented the omelette.
Yeah.
They got a brain in their
I
head.
think
There were no fillings. Cheese, ham, nothing.
Exactly. Frying pan, 2 bits of stone and a bit of wood hanging off it. It doesn't make any sense.
You wouldn't want it. Even if they made it, you'd say no.
Exactly. If language had indeed been invented at that point.
Yeah, that's right.
But even then it was the vegetarian option.
That's right. So, a correct challenge, Paul. 9 seconds on Dinosaurs, starting now.
You may be familiar with the movie The Omelette That Land for...
Graham challenge.
It was a repetition of movie.
I said film before.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
That's why I said movie that time.
Yeah, no, good. Very good.
Right, 6 seconds, still with you, Paul. Another point as well, of course. Dinosaurs, starting now.
My grandfather worked at the Science Museum, and I remember going to visit him when one of the exhibits was a huge...
So Paul Merton was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point, and for others in the round, he's got a strong lead now. Head of Clement, Freud, Graham, Norton, and Linda Smith in that order. And Graham, your turn to begin, and the subject is keeping the wolf from the door. That is the subject, and as you know, you can repeat any of those words on the subject, and you start now.
Keeping the wolf from the door is something I'm sure Ulrika Johnson became very familiar with when working as a hostess on the sports/entertainment show Gladiators. Late at night, she'd be in a room eating smoked fish or whatever Swedish people have as a bedtime titbit, and she would hear a familiar noise. Oh no, she'd think. Surely that is the sound of lycra against cheap hotel carpet. The wolf is crawling down the corridor towards my room.
Paul, challenge.
The voice has deepened over the years.
It's the fish, is it?
Have you got a challenge with the rules adjustment? Graham, yes. You still have the subject because he didn't challenge, incorrectly, and you get a point for an incorrect challenge. You have keeping the wolf from the door, 14 seconds starting now.
Poor people use the expression keeping the wolf from the door, meaning that they're trying to keep body and soul together. I don't understand this. Why would a wolf come to the house of a poor...
So Graham Norton, speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra. In fact, he started with the subject and actually finished with the subject, was only interrupted once. And so that hasn't happened for quite a long time, especially with these talented people up here. And the sad thing is you work so hard, Graham, but you're still in third place. But it's the contribution, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, sir. I don't feel patronised now.
We're moving into the last round, as I warned you a little while ago, and it's Clement's turn to begin, and the subject, very aptly to finish the show up here in Newcastle upon Tyne, it is Geordies. So, you wouldn't want me to talk about Mackins, would you? Geordies, that's the subject, Clement, and there are 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Geordies is the time...
Are they? Is they? I mean, it's all... Tenses flying all over the place.
58 seconds, Paul. Geordies starting now.
Well, of course, as the people in the audience know here, but to explain to our worldwide listenership who are listening throughout the globe, Geordies is a term for people who come from the Newcastle area. I'm very pleased to see that Bobby Robson is now manager of the local football team, because I think that it's about time they had some major success. I felt very bad for them being in the cup finals and losing like that. It was terrible.
Graham Norton challenge.
They're turning into an ugly mob. I'm saving you. Run now while you still can.
No.
There's a taxi waiting.
No, actually, he was trying to ingratiate himself, saying how wonderful Newcastle United were. Paul, an incorrect challenge.
Oh, lovely.
34 seconds. Geordies starting now.
What do you think of some of the players that have been sold in the last 15 years? Chris Waddle, Peter Beardsley, Paul Gascoigne, of course, is still...
Graham Norton challenge.
Repetition of Paul?
That's Paul Merton. He didn't use the word Paul.
Deviation from Geordie. He's actually talking about some football team that I don't know.
No. Paul, carry on with Geordies. 26 seconds starting now.
There was a comedian from this area who was called Bobby Thompson, who was a...
Clement Freud challenge first.
Repetition of Bobby.
Yes, we had Bobby Robson. Right, 23 seconds, Clement. Geordies starting now.
If you live in Newcastle, you would believe that we had 6 kings called Geordie. There was George I, who only spoke English, Geordie II, who had an accent, Geordie III, who went mad, and Geordie IV, who was an admiral, was extremely mean and wouldn't pay for his coronation.
Paul's challenge.
Repetition of Geordie.
Yes, because the subject is Geordies.
Yeah.
You are partisan, aren't you? I mean, that is the correct challenge when the rules of just a minute, and I have to give it to him. So, Paul, you've got back on Geordies with 4 seconds to go, starting now.
Undoubtedly, St James's Park is regarded as one of the finest...
Well, as I said before, that was to be the last round, so let me give you the final situation. Linda Smith, who gave us great value, was always finished in 4th place, but only just behind Graham Norton with his fantastic contribution, finishing in 3rd place. Clement Freud with his usual amazing contribution, finishing in 2nd place. But out in the lead with more points than anybody else, with someone with his outstanding contribution, as always, Paul Merton, we say you are the winner this week. We do hope all our listeners have enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, and it only remains to say thank you again to these 4 outstanding players of the game, Paul Merton, Graham Norton, Linda Smith and Clement Freud. We also thank Janet Staplehurst, who's kept the score for me, and she's blown her whistle so delightfully. We thank Ian Messiter, who created the game, and our producer and director, Chris Neal, and we also thank this delightful Geordie audience here in the City Hall of Newcastle for being so enthusiastic and lovely and warm to play to. From them, from us, tune in next time we play Just a Minute and take to the air and enjoy this great game. Goodbye. Welcome to Just a Minute. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away, once more it is my pleasure to welcome our many listeners throughout the world, and also to welcome the 4 exciting, talented and experienced players of the game who have joined me this week. We are delighted to welcome back 2 of the long-standing players of the game who've been with us since the show first began 33 years ago, and that is Peter Jones and Clement Freud. And we also welcome 2 of the younger generation of comedy performers, and we're delighted to have Kit Hesketh-Harvey and Tony Hawks. Would you please welcome all 4 of them? And as usual, I'm going to ask them to speak on a subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Beside me sits Janet Staplehurst, and she's going to help me with the score and also blow her whistle when the 60 seconds are up. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the Theatre Royal in that beautiful, wonderful city of Norwich. We begin the show this week with Peter Jones. Peter, what an apt subject to start any show. Kicking off. Talk on that subject if you can. 60 seconds starting now.
Well, that's something that they usually ask a celebrity to do at football matches. But the phrase, to me, reminds me of those dramatic stories of last minute... What's the matter? The hero sees this girl in the middle of a river and he kicks off his shoes. Now, I've always wondered about that because it's frightfully difficult to kick shoes off. If they're...
Clement Freud challenge.
2 shoes.
2 shoes. You were kicking too many shoes off.
4 shoes.
Yes. Clement, a correct challenge, so you get a point for a correct challenge and you take over the subject, which is kicking off, and there are 21 seconds available starting now.
I had this friend who was a serial arsonist, but couldn't find the first fire to light. And to kick off when you are doing something in sequence was incredibly difficult for him. So being a celebrity, he went to a football match and kicking off the ball, everybody applauded and he bowed, and the referee blew his whistle.
There is an experienced player of the game, a very, very subtle, very well done, very clever, Clement. And whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains an extra point, and it was Clement Freud. Tony Hawks, will you take the next round? The subject is Eastern Promise. Tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now.
I once came all the way to Norwich on an Eastern Promise, only to find that the girl in question had gone to Lowestoft for the day, which was something of a disappointment because I was planning on taking her to Carrow Road to watch Norwich City, my thinking being that she'd...
Kit Hesketh-Harvey.
Repetition of Norwich. I can barely bear to say it here.
That's absolutely
I know.
right.
We can't have too
Surely
much of
of all
it.
places to repeat it, it would be here.
Of course it should be. course it should be.
But in just a minute, if you repeat it, that is repetition.
I have sinned, I'm sorry.
No, not a sin. It's just broken the rules of the game. And, Kit, you have got a correct challenge, a point to you, and you take over the subject, which is Eastern Promise. 40 seconds starting now.
It's a great pity that you listeners at home can't see Peter Jones in his pashmina and his chador as he lies alluringly on the table offering sherbet dip from his navel for us to lick at. He is as full of Eastern...
Tony, you challenge.
Kit's on drugs.
Have you got another challenge with the rules?
I just want some of them, that's all. I want to see Peter in the same light. No, I haven't.
We'll give you a bonus point because we enjoy the interruption. But Kit was interrupted, so he gets a point for that, and he keeps the subject, and there are 24 seconds still available, Kit, on Eastern Promise, starting now.
As a local boy, it's so thrilling to be here in the easternmost tip of our kingdom. Anyone who's been in the dikes...
Clement Freud challenge. I must say, the moments you press your buzzer, Clement, are really very apt in this. So what is your challenge?
Well, I've been in the dikes, but the easternmost tip is Lowestoft.
A correct challenge. Geographically, you are correct.
Appreciated.
Yes, you're deeply appreciated. 18 seconds still available, and another point to you, Clement. Eastern Promise starting now.
I always think of Turkish Delight as having Eastern Promise, and once stayed in a hotel in Ankara where a piece of this delicious sweetmeat was put on my pillow. It was so disgusting that I flushed it down the loo and it would not go.
Kit, you've challenged.
I don't think they have loos in Ankara.
It's a nice thought and an amusing challenge, but having been there, I can tell you they do, but maybe they call them something else. So, no, an incorrect challenge. Clement, you've still got the subject. You've got 1 second on Eastern Promise, starting now.
I put it in the Bosphorus.
So Clement Freud was then speaking again when the whistle went again, that extra point for doing so, and has got a strong lead at the end of the round. And Clement, it is your turn to begin, and the subject is lager louts. I don't know why you laugh. They're not very laughable creatures. But anyway, that's the subject, Clement. Will you talk on it? 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Lager Lout is a sort of down-market version of a Gewürztraminer Jobbo or a Chateau du Cru Beaucaillou villain. Lager, as you will know, is a slowly fermented beer, and Lout is someone, usually male, of poor manners and disgraceful behaviour. Lager Louts mostly come about at football and cricket matches and make you feel uneasy, apprehensive. A Mexican wave is about the only way you can get out of being assaulted or injured or annoyed.
Tony Hawk's challenge.
You can give him a lager, that usually does it. I think a Mexican wave is useless defending yourself against the lager. Because your arms are in the air and they can go straight in the stomach.
So what is your challenge when the rules are just a minute?
Well, deviation.
I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, Tony, and say that you have 22 seconds on lager louts starting now.
I think there should be a health warning on cans of lager saying, beware, this drink might cause you to pick on someone much bigger than you. Because there's no doubt about it, one does become so emboldened when one is full of...
Kit Hesketh-Harvey.
Lots of ones there.
There were lots of ones there, yeah.
Yes. Ones?
So, okay. Kit, you've cleverly got in with only 8 seconds to go.
Great.
The subject is lager louts starting now.
Of course, we don't have them in Norwich. We're far too urbane and civilised, and we're witless most of the time anyway.
Peter Jones, you've challenged.
Well, it's not true. I saw one on the way in.
I'm perfectly prepared to believe that Norwich has its little core of lager louts like any other part of our island. So, Peter, I say a correct challenge, and 2 seconds. You can tell us something about lager louts starting now.
He was leaning against a lamppost.
So, to the end of that round, Peter Jones, speaking as the whistle went again, that extra point is equal with Kit Hesketh-Harvey in second place, 1 point behind Clement Freud, our leader. Tony Hawks is behind them, and Kit, it's your turn to begin. And the subject is working for the opposition. Tell us something about that in this game, starting now.
The most notable example is, of course, Theon Haig, whose name in Welsh means my little rosebud. Very unfortunately, in colloquial, Marseillaise means fundament or colon, which is perhaps why she's not very keen on going into Europe. The other one is the recent Tory defence minister, about whom we write a little song, Don Portillo enjoyed the occasional peccadillo. He puts the bye into election, we say, and is his seat... I'm whittering now, I'm sorry, I'm into libel.
That is the joy of just a minute. You can witter away so entertainingly that they love it. A round of applause, but Tony Hawks, you challenge first.
Well, I think there was wittering. I think hesitation.
Hesitation, yes, because we can't be had for wittering, because most of you do it all the time. But Tony, correct challenge, 24 seconds, working for the opposition, starting now.
If you were a goalkeeper and you deliberately let in every shot that came your way during a football match, I suppose it could be said that you were working for the opposition or playing for Ipswich Town. Whichever you seem to look at it. Obviously, I'm trying to ingratiate myself. I wouldn't do that. When I was in that particular town, the joke might be the other way around, but who knows. But that would be something that Bruce Grobbelaar was alleged to have done.
Tony Hawks was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point, and now he's equal in the lead with Clement Freud. Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. The subject, how I deal with bores. 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, I feign interest. And during my long career as an actor and the training that I received at the beginning, I've learned to be able to simulate interest and have this expression of wide-eyed wonder, which I project towards the bore.
Tony Hawks is challenged.
I'm just really worried because I shared a taxi with him and he looked really interested over there.
Tony, the only thing I can do is to say thank you for your interjection and give you a point for it because the audience clapped. I think that's the... And, Peter, you were interrupted, so you get a point for that and you keep the subject. Yes. 40 seconds are still available. How I deal with bores, starting now.
Now, if the bore comes to a halt and doesn't seem to be able to go on, I say, please do continue, because I'm absolutely fascinated.
Tony Hawk's challenge.
This is exactly what happened in the taxi.
I can't continue to give you bonus points, Tony. I will just say we enjoyed it very much, but Peter was interrupted, so he gets another point. And he continues, 32 seconds still available, Peter. How I deal with bores, starting now.
Well, Tony didn't actually halt. He talked all the bloody time. And so I didn't have to say, do go on, because he did. Anyway, but if he had, I would have asked him to try to prolong the monologue that he was delivering, which would have been, I'm sure, just as boring as the earlier part. Nevertheless, he told me about his golf and going to Moldavia or Moravia or somewhere where he...
Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition of oars.
So, Clement, I give it to you. And you've cleverly got him with 2 seconds to go. Another oar. You're going to have to work hard now to win him back, Clement. You had him in the palm of your hand at the beginning, but anyway. How I deal with bores, Clement, 2 seconds, starting now.
I will get a Black & Decker rotary drill.
So Clement Freud, speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point. He's 1 point ahead of the others and is just in the lead. Tony Hawks, your turn to begin. The subject, doilies. Tell us something about those dainty little things. Doilies. 60 seconds, starting now.
Doilies seem to me to be completely pointless things that you place underneath cakes on plates. I don't know much about them, despite visiting www.doily.com. I'm sorry, I have to go and have a lie down now.
Well, that's the fun of the game. It's almost impossible sometimes. But to repeat it once, but to go on... Clement.
It's the only way you can visit that website.
I know. Clement, you were the first in there, and we all know what it was. Repetition, and you have doilies, and you have 49 seconds starting now.
Doilies were named after a man called Doily, who lived in Croydon and invented those extraordinarily pointless bits of paper or cloth which stop a cup or a glass leaving a mark on a polished table. I'm speaking slowly because I don't want to be...
Kit, you challenge.
Repetition of I.
Well listened, Kit. Yes, you got him on that one. Doilies is with you now. 27 seconds, starting now.
The most famous Doilies.
Clement, for your challenge.
Hesitation.
Kit has another point for being interrupted, and 26 seconds to continue on. Doilies, Kit, starting now.
Were Richard and Bridget Doily Cart, who were impresarios to...
Peter Jones' challenge.
Repetition. Richard.
No, Richard and Bridget. Sorry, it's my diction, love.
Richard and Bridget. Not Richard and Richard Doily.
Oh, I see. Well, you're quite right. Your diction is...
it's slipping a little, isn't it?
It is, rather, yes.
The 21 seconds, Doilies, with you, Kit, starting now.
Put on the Savoy operas of William Schwenk Gilbert and Arthur Seymour Sullivan made so much money that they could found a hotel, the Savoy Hotel, and I've... Oh, Lord, no.
And Tony challenge.
Repetition of Savoy.
There were two, yes, that's right, Savoy Hotel. 11 seconds with you, Tony Hawks, on Doilies, starting now.
I suppose one of the wonderful thing about doilies is that you can colour them in if you have access to some felt pens. I used to do this a lot as a youngster, didn't have many hobbies or friends. Used to bore them, actually, whenever I got into a taxi.
Tony Hawks was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and he's now equal in the lead with Clement Freud, but they're only 2 points ahead of the other two who are equal in second place. And Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. The subject is Norwich at night. Oh, they've obviously experienced it here in this audience. You've seen a little bit of it as you came in, but tell us more about Norwich at night in just a minute, starting now.
Yes, last time I was here, I saw quite a bit of it. I went immediately to the part of Norwich which is described as the Soho of this town. And I must say, I was amazed. I met a lady who was standing in a shop doorway. And
You may well have paused after that, Peter. Yes.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to rescue the honour of my county.
So your challenge
was
is?
Hesitation.
Hesitation. You saw the woman in the doorway and there's a long, long pause.
There was on the night as well.
Kit, you've got 40 seconds to tell us something about the woman in the doorway. Saying about Norwich at night, 40 seconds starting now.
We do as we do all over.
Clement, yes.
Hesitation. Repetition of do's.
Clement, correct challenge to you, 38 seconds, Norwich at night, starting now.
Norwich at night is pretty much like Norwich in the daytime, only there's less light. I particularly miss Boundary Park, where I used to go on many an evening to watch greyhound racing and lose money. Norwich is only 33 miles from Walberswick, where I live, and at night it is even more alluring than Southwell, which I always thought was the biggest place anywhere until I came to Norwich. Adnam's Ales, Green King, Coleman's Mustard, the Saxon keep of the castle, which is actually...
Tony Hawk's challenge.
I think he's actually just talking about Norwich as opposed
at
to
night.
Norwich. As opposed to Norwich at night, I was going to say. He's just talking about Norwich. I want to hear more about Norwich at night. I'm going out after this. I want some tips.
I think you've got a legitimate challenge. He was going on about Norwich and comparing it with Walberswick, Southwold and so forth and everything like that. And he wasn't emphasising the night aspect of the subject, and you got in with half a second to go. Can, in half a second, tell us anything about Norwich at night, starting now?
Chicago's.
So Tony Hawks, with those last 2 points, is now back equal in the lead with Clement Freud, followed by Kit Hesketh-Harvey and Peter Jones in that order. And Tony, it is your turn to begin. The subject, seeing a man about a dog. An interesting phrase which has often been used, but talk about it. 60 seconds starting now.
I suppose seeing a man about a dog is a phrase used by people when they don't really want the other person with whom they are talking to know exactly what they're doing. Why it should be that, I don't know. It could be I'm seeing a Navajo Indian about an ironing board. That would work just as well, in my opinion.
Peter Jones is challenged.
It wouldn't work in Norwich.
And it certainly would not work as well as the well-known phrase, seeing a man about a dog. They wouldn't know what you were talking about. So, Peter, I agree. Deviation from the subject, and you have 42 seconds on seeing a man about a dog starting now.
Well, it's a euphemism for actually going to the lavatory, if you'll forgive me explaining it in that straightforward manner. What? You knew, did you?
Clement has challenged you. Clement, what's your
Deviation.
Why?
He said what?
He said what?
Yes.
There's no penalty for saying what, is there?
No. So I think it was an incorrect challenge. So you still have 33 seconds to continue on seeing a man about a dog starting now.
Because there are many sensitive souls who don't like to admit that their bladder is vulnerable, particularly if they've drunk a lot of lager and they have to go. And I don't blame them, really, because seeing a man about a dog is a fairly innocent sort of thing to do, depending on the dog, of course.
Clement, why?
Mistake.
It was a mistake?
Yes.
So you've actually been interrupted. You get another point for that.
Good.
Yes. I like the way you fight for your points, Peter. Right. Wait, Clement, you challenged
I'd
again.
like him to have another point.
I don't think Peter wants charity. He's going to win his points, or not at all. So, Peter, you get the other point, but not the second one. You have 11 seconds. Seeing a man about a dog starting now.
There are devices that you can strap to your leg. I'm not wearing mine at the moment.
During that big laugh, Hesketh-Harvey actually challenged you. What's your challenge?
I think he was on the previous subject with that woman in the doorway, wasn't he?
No. He's rambling.
No. So, Kit, it wasn't... it was incorrect. Chance, you were interrupted again, then. Seeing a man about a dog, 4 seconds for you, Peter, starting now.
In my opinion, it's much better to get one of those napkins.
Peter Jones was then speaking as the whistle went, getting an extra point for doing so. And he did actually get quite a few points in that round. And did extremely well. And he's leapt forward, and he's equal in the lead now with Tony Hawks and Clement Freud. And Kit Hesketh-Harvey is only 1 point behind, so it's very fair, because the contributions are equally divided, and now are the points as well. And Clement Freud, your turn to begin. The subject is Swiss Army knives. Tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now.
This, of course, is also part of the same syndrome. It is a big, red, heavy thing which you have in your pocket, and people say, "Are you about to see a man about a dog?" And you say, "No, this is a Swiss Army knife. It is simply massive in size by virtue of the fact that the Swiss Army knife has about its..."
Kit, you challenged.
He resorted to the visual, I'm sorry.
I know, he did, yes. He tried to demonstrate, because it is a tough game, keeping going like that. 33 seconds, Swiss Army knives, starting now.
I think it's completely bogus. It's a device. There is no Swiss army. We all know that Switzerland is neutral. There is no Swiss navy. Presumably...
Who challenged? Tony Hawks, yes.
Repetition of no.
There's
There is, actually. There is no. I repeated all those.
I know you did, that's right.
Well,
yes.
how many would you like?
That's probably about 3 points.
Right, 26 seconds for you, Tony, on Swiss Army knives, starting now.
If I was in the Swiss Army, I would imagine that having...
Peter Jones challenged.
Well, Kit has told us that there isn't one.
So what do I do there? Talking in a fantasy way about being in the Swiss Army, it might be a dream ahead. I'll tell you what, I haven't done this for a long time. I will put it to the superior judgment and wisdom of this delightful audience here at the Theatre Royal. You judge. If you agree with Peter's challenge, and you want him to have the subject, and you think it's a legitimate challenge, you cheer for him. And if you disagree, you all boo the challenge, and you all do it together now. All right, that's enough. It's a long time since I did pantomime here, but that's about it. Right, so I think the cheers had it to begin with, and then the boos took over. It was, Very strange. I'm going to give the cheers the benefit of the doubt and say, Peter, you have 22 seconds on Swiss Army knives starting now.
Why have I got 22 seconds?
Because you had a correct challenge. The audience has said your challenge was legitimate. They cheered for you.
Oh, I see.
Good, right. You've got the subject. You've got 22 seconds. You've got Swiss Army knives starting now.
But if there were an army, and if you were permitted to join...
Who challenged? Tony, you challenged.
There isn't an army.
I know you said if. Now, I gave it against Tony last time because it was a sort of supposition, and so we used the same supposition to be fair and redress the balance. I think it's only fair I leave it to Tony this time.
I think to be fair, you ought to admit that there's not only an army in Switzerland, but they have conscription.
Up until now, everything that Kit has said on the subject, we've taken to be gospel truth.
Absolutely.
He hasn't got a bloody clue what he's talking about. He knows nothing about Switzerland or its army.
So, Tony, you have the subject now. There are 17 seconds. Swiss Army knives starting now.
For 7 years, I was a sergeant in the Swiss Army. We fought many a fine battle.
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation.
Yes, I don't believe you ever were in the Swiss Army. I certainly can't see you as a sergeant. 11 seconds for you, Clement. Swiss Army knives starting now.
It has a corkscrew, scissors, a contraption for getting grit out of a horse's hoof, and almost any number of other useful things. Whistle.
Clement Freud, speaking as whistle, got that extra point. He's equal with Tony Hawks in the lead, followed in second place, 2 points behind, by Peter Jones and Kit Hesketh-Harvey together. So, Kit Hesketh-Harvey, the final round. The subject is Kissograms, 60 seconds as usual, and you start now.
Perfectly obviously, we can't be paid as performers in just a minute. This is merely a front for our actual role as Kissograms. You can hire Peter Jones, dressed as Jemima Khan, with more coal around his eyebrows than Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins. Nicholas Parsons puts on lederhosen.
Peter Jones challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I agree. There was a hesitation. He mentioned my name and he hesitated. The Kissograms is with you, Peter. There are 43 seconds available, starting now.
I once made a speech at the Dorchester, and in the middle of it, a policeman, or somebody I thought was a policeman or policewoman.
Clement Freud challenge.
Oh, 2 policemen.
You repeated policeman.
I know I did, yes.
And they wanted to hear the story.
They'd rather hear the story than that fruitling challenge.
Clement did have a correct challenge, and he has 36 seconds on Kissograms starting now.
Peter Jones was making an after-dinner speech at the Dorchester Hotel when 2 policemen came in, dressed as deliverers of kissogram messages. One of them was naked. In fact, no clothes at all, not even a helmet. Whereas the other one had a G-string in purple and green. And my companion, who is a brilliant performer at dinner tables all over the West End, was heard to say, "Excuse me, my Lord Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, lords, ladies and gentlemen."
Clement Freud kept going to the end and took over Peter's story. He not only got a point for speaking as a whistle went, but he's actually finished up ahead of all the other 3. And there's only 1 point. So there was Clement Freud, Tony Hawks, Peter Jones, and Kit Hesketh-Harvey in that order. 1 point separating each of them. But Clement, you were out on top, so we say you're the winner this week. It only remains for me to say thank you to our 4 individual and talented players of the game, Tony Hawks, Peter Jones, Kit Hesketh-Harvey and Clement Freud. I also thank Janet Staplehurst for having helped me with the score, and also Chris Neal, our producer and director, who helps to try and keep us in order, and also the creator of the game. We thank him immensely, that is Ian Messiter, and also we thank this lovely audience here in Norwich who've come from different parts of Norfolk to egg us on our way. We hope you've enjoyed it. From me, Nicholas Parsons, from our players, from our audience, goodbye. Tune in next time we play the game. Bye. Welcome to Just a Minute. Thank Thank you. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away, once more it is my infinite pleasure to welcome the many listeners we have throughout the world, and also to welcome the four talented, exciting, exuberant, and iridescently attractive players of the game that we have on the show this week. We welcome back two young, distinguished performers, a very witty young man who's very clever on the stage, that is Kit Hesketh-Harvey, a very talented stand-up comedian, Tony Hawks, a very lovable, humorous man, Peter Jones, and a very formidable and witty and erudite creature, that is Clement Freud. Would you please welcome all four of them? As usual, I am going to ask them to speak for just a minute, if they can, on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Beside me sits Janet Staplehurst, who is going to help me keep the score and blow her whistle when the 60 seconds are up. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the handsome Theatre Royal in the heart of that fine city of Norwich. And we have a truly enthusiastic Norfolk audience in front of us to cheer us on our way as we begin the show with Tony Hawks. And Tony, what an apt subject, milking laughs. 60 seconds starting now.
What's the fastest animal in the world? A snail if you throw it hard enough. Or put it on a high-speed train. Perhaps pop it in a space shuttle. That's an example, or at least an attempt, at milking a laugh. I had one at the beginning, and I tried to carry on with two further additions to that fantastic gag. The fact that I failed abysmally doesn't matter. The point is, I was attempting to milk a laugh, which is the subject I have been given, and I'm so thrilled to be talking about it, because it's something I've always wanted to do as a comedian. To milk a laugh means that you don't need as much material. In this situation, all I need is 1 minute, and I would be thrilled if I could do that. But that won't necessarily happen.
Peter Jones, you pressed your buzzer. There was no noise, but your light has come on in front of me.
There you are, you see.
What is your challenge? Your light came on. You have a challenge. What is your challenge? Hesitation, repetition, or deviation? You've only been playing the game for 33 years. I don't know.
Yes, well, I think there's something wrong with the mechanism.
Peter, I don't think you have a legitimate challenge. You mind me saying so? No, you don't mind. All right. So, that was an incorrect challenge.
Yes.
Yes. And so, Tony, that means you have a point for an incorrect challenge. You keep the subject. You have 16 seconds, milking laughs starting now.
A laugh is also a make or breed of cow in Scandinavia. And they go around milking these laughs all morning, sometimes well into the afternoon. And frankly, it's a tribute to these people that they do it, because the teats are very short.
In this game, whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains an extra point. On this occasion was Tony Hawks, who started with the subject and finished with the subject, and you won't be surprised to hear that he's the only one who's got any points at the end of that round. So, Peter Jones, will you take the next round? The subject is Esperanto. Tell us something about that interesting subject in this game, starting now.
Chico Jehegra Mutalea. Which is the way in which our Esperanto societies always address their audiences. It means, in English, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I won't repeat it because I shall be recorded. But it's a pretty embarrassing sort of language to know, because it's very difficult to find somebody else who speaks it or can understand it. But we, in the small clubs that are flourishing all over the country, in a very minor way, we do rather like it, because it was invented by some pathetic man who couldn't think of anything better to do with his time than invent this Esperanto. Did I say invent before? Probably I did.
Tony Hawks, you've challenged.
Yes, I think repetition of invent, I think.
Yes, you drew his attention to it, Pete, and he challenged immediately. And you went for 57 seconds. There you are. You've got the audience with you, but you've lost the subject. I'm so sorry. Because that was a correct challenge, so I have to be fair with the rules in just a minute and say, Tony Hawks, you have a correct challenge. Another point to you, and the subject Esperanto, 3 seconds starting now.
There is no word for swing bin in Esperanto.
So at the end of that round, Tony Hawks has got all the points still. Speaking of those, he's got 4 points. Clement Freud, will you take the next round? The subject, why Norfolk is so flat. Can you tell us something about that in this game, starting now?
Norfolk is so flat because there are no great elevations, which is...
Kit Hesketh-Harvey.
So there are. This is a terrible, terrible indictment of Norfolk. Anyone who's tried to climb up the castle hill is absolutely spavined by it. It's a vertiginous escarpment.
Yes, but on the other hand, Kit, lovely to hear from you, by the way, but the thing is that he's giving his interpretation of why he considers Norfolk is so flat. You keep the subject, Clement, 55 seconds on why Norfolk is so flat, starting now.
Which is...
And Peter Jones' challenge.
Hesitation. Very slow off the mark.
Why? Yes, but not as slow enough to be hesitation, Peter. No. Good try. I'm glad you're fighting for it there, Peter. It's great. Clement, another point to you, and why Norfolk is so flat. 54 seconds, starting now.
Which is why it is such a good place for growing bananas and tropical fruit. You will all know that Norfolk is an island some 900 miles west of Sydney, which is the headquarters of the Melanese people, of whom I think Jonah Lomu family was...
There was an There was an
There was a hesitation. It was so interesting and so clever to take it over to that little island in the Pacific there. So, Kit, you've got in. Correct challenge. A point to you. 33 seconds. You tell us something about why Norfolk is so flat, starting now.
It was Noel Coward, who came from Twickenham, God help him, which is like a plateau, who said this in the first place in his play, Private Lives. Norfolk goes up and down all over the place. It's Cambridgeshire that is flat, and Lincolnshire, which were drained by dikes and Dutchmen in the 1680s. They are dreary beyond description, but here in...
Peter Jones' challenge.
He's talking about different counties altogether.
Yeah, but he was comparing them to Norfolk, Peter, and saying, and the audience enjoyed that because they realised that he was defending Norfolk. And...
We are not here for them to enjoy it. Matter.
Give Peter a bonus point. He's tried so hard. He deserves it. The audience loved it. But he was comparing it to Norfolk, and I got that impression very, very strongly. So you have 10 seconds with another point, of course, Kit. Why Norfolk is so flat, starting now.
There's a little bit of Thetford Forest, Centre Parks, the most marvellous holiday, which is flat. You can bicycle around in an eco-friendly situation and not stretch your sinews.
Clement Freud challenge.
Advertising.
Absolutely. He's got a Centre Park sweatshirt on as well.
Well, advertising is not one of the rules of just a minute. So you have half a second.
Deviation from not advertising.
Half a second. Tell us more about why Norfolk is so flat, Kid, starting now.
The cliffs at Sheringham.
I think the way Kit Hesketh-Harvey was going on about Norfolk, then if I'd given it against him, I'd have been lynched by this audience, actually. At the end of that round, Kit is now in second place behind Tony Hawks. Then comes Clement Freud and Peter Jones. And Kit, will you begin the next round? The subject, spare parts. Tell us something about spare parts in just a minute, starting now.
With a chronic shortage in the NHS of spare parts for organ transplant, I'm happy tonight to announce that I'm opening Nicholas Parsons up and distributing his giblets among the audience tonight. His teeth are heavily reconditioned, I grant you, but would grace the mouth of any 19-year-old. His brain is tiny but barely used. Most importantly, there is his nose. Who would not be happy to walk through the Madam Market strutting proudly saying, I have the Parsons nose?
I'll forgive you for all the rest for the last gag you did, which you just got in. But Tony Hawk's challenge you before the Parsons nose. Yes.
Well, he said who would not be happy, and me, frankly.
So what is your challenge
I was a
when
bit
the rules
late.
are just a
I
minute?
was,
I'd
trying-
love to give it against Kit after the things he said.
Oh, right.
Right.
Well, I haven't got a challenge, actually.
No, right. You just enjoy coming in like
Yes.
that. Well, it's a very good thing. We didn't get a huge reaction, so I can't give you a bonus point. So, Kit, you've still got the subject, and you've got 38 seconds and another point, of course. Spare parts starting now.
I've lately been having the most awful trouble with my big end. And
Tony, you challenge first.
I have got a challenge this time.
Yes.
Yes, I think the thought of his big end and the trouble he had with it made him lost for words, and he hesitated.
Absolutely. He collapsed. He collapsed with giggles. So, Tony, a correct challenge, a point to you, and 32 seconds. You tell us something about spare parts starting now.
It's very difficult to work out whether your parts are actually spare or not. I've got mine here with me tonight, and I'm not really using them. But are they spare? Maybe I'll find out if I go out in Norwich this evening to Chicago's and find a suitable use for them, because they are, frankly, redundant as I sit here. I want to use my parts in a more...
Used.
You were using your spare parts too much. 9 seconds available. Kit Hesketh-Harvey, spare parts starting now.
There's a funny little cul-de-sac in my intestinal tract, my appendix.
Peter, you got in first, yes.
Yes, he hesitated.
He stumbled, which we call hesitation, Peter. So you've got it.
All right, he stumbled.
And 2 seconds. You tell us something about spare parts starting now.
It's very difficult to get them.
So Peter Jones was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so. He's in second place behind Kit Hesketh-Harvey and Tony Hawkes are equal leaders. And Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. The subject, a peculiar practice. Now tell us something about a peculiar practice, starting now.
Well, it would be, if you can imagine a doctor collecting as many spare parts as he possibly can, paying for them very often, and then keeping them in a fridge until he hopes the price may rise. And there are doctors who are unscrupulous enough, I'm sure, to do this, depriving people who need them, like Tony Hawk's poor man, and they don't ever seem to be able to get them because they can't collect enough money to subscribe to this doctor's income. And
Kit Hesketh-Harvey, you challenge.
Well, he stopped, really.
Yes, he did. Yes, I think it was more than a pause. It was a full stop, actually.
knowing when to stop is one of the great secrets of entertainment.
I know. But it's...
Well, good night, all.
But it is disastrous in just a minute. So, Kit, you had a correct challenge, and there are 22 seconds available. A peculiar practice starting now.
It's a little-known fact about the Australian composer Percy Grainger that he was a sadomasochistic flagellant. So when you hear...
Clement Freud challenged, and Peter challenged after that. Clement, your challenge first.
I think we all knew that.
So what is your challenge when the rules are just a minute, Clement?
Deviation.
Oh, yes. Clement, you have a peculiar practice, 13 seconds, starting now.
The Spanish have this very peculiar practice of calling people portillo and getting English women to marry their men and bring them in to infiltrate our parliament.
Clement Freud speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and he's moved forward. He's now in second place behind Kit Hesketh-Harvey, our leader. Clement, it's your turn to begin, and the subject, if I was king for a day. Tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now.
If I was king for a day, straight after breakfast, I would summon my Privy Council and tell them to pass an edict whereby I remain king for the rest of my life. I would then settle back and bring in that splendid concept of nepotism rules okay. There are in my family a huge number of tremendously useful secretaries of state, ministers, heads of quangos and chairmen of public companies, in whom I, as king for the day, in fact longer, would be able to influence if I needed.
Peter Jones' challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think he was stumbling there, and that's what I call
Compared to
stumbling.
whom?
I would say hesitation from the normal pace at which you go, Clement. You were getting slower and slower and slower until I think that was a legitimate hesitation. So, Peter, you have 18 seconds. You tell us something about if I was king for a day, starting now.
Well, I should look round and ask friends if they knew anybody like Mrs. Simpson. And if they did, I would probably invite her to join me on the throne, which would be, of course, against the law. But nevertheless, it would be rather nice to have a companion.
So Peter Jones speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point. He's moved forward. He's equal in third place with Tony Hawks, 1 point behind Clement Freud, and he's 1 point behind Kit Hesketh-Harvey, our leader at this moment. And Kit, it's your turn to begin with the subject. Oh, a very apt subject for Norwich, mustard. Tell us something about mustard, starting now.
As no doubt you stand bedazzled by the architectural beauties of this fine city, it is interesting to note that they were all paid for by mustard in the most part. Colemans of Norwich, Lords Lieutenant of this county, benefactors of the art gallery in the Castle Museum, and builders of the hospital. What a lovely subject is mustard. It goes terribly well with pork if you put garlic and cream on it. Somebody say something.
Peter Jones' challenge.
There was there.
There was a hesitation.
Yes.
Right. So, Peter, you tell us something about mustard. And 33 seconds available, starting now.
There are some fish that will be improved with the addition of a little mustard smeared round the top to bottom.
Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
Hesitation, yes. Top to bottom. I like it. Clement, 26 seconds available. Mustard, starting now.
When I, as a child in East Anglia, saw a field which was yellow, I knew that it was mustard. And I kept thinking it was mustard, although now every piece of land of that colour...
Tony Hawk's challenge, sir.
I think there was a slight hesitation.
There was a hesitation, yes. 14 seconds. You tell us something about mustard, Tony, starting now.
If I was king for a day, I'd have lots...
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation from the subject.
No, he hasn't got going yet. He might have said he'd have mustard every single day.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Is that right? I mean, he hadn't really got established, so that was an incorrect challenge. 11 seconds for you still, Tony, on mustard starting now.
I'd have mustard every single day.
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition, you've just said that.
Give Clement a bonus point. We enjoyed the challenge, but Tony was interrupted. He gets a point, and he continues with mustard, and 9 seconds starting now.
It is, in fact, my favourite colour. I've got it on the walls of my kitchen at home. It would have been cheaper to have bought paint and put that up there, but I smeared it on. The place smells. Nobody comes.
So, Tony Hawk speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point. He's now equal in the lead with Clement Freud. And Peter, your turn to begin. The subject, the do's and don'ts of radio. You have 60 seconds as usual. Starting now.
Well, I wish I knew. I've never been awfully good at talking on the radio because I'm apt to hesitate, deviate, or whatever else I can do, to make it more difficult and easier for the other people who are in the game. Don't ever insult the...
Tony Hawk's your challenge.
I think he's lost the will to live there.
I think he lost something, I must say, but Tony, correct challenge, hesitation. 33 seconds available. The do's and don'ts of radio starting now.
Do talk nice and clearly like I am doing at the moment. Don't mumble incomprehensibly like that so that nobody can really hear what you're saying, can't you?
A Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of mumble.
That's correct. He went... and that was a repetition of... So It's legitimate.
I want it written out or I'm not going to accept it.
Clement, I give you a correct challenge in 23 seconds. The do's and don'ts of radio starting now.
I found that one of the do's on radio, if you are a performer, is to bring your mobile telephone. It makes such a huge difference. In the middle of having a conversation, being on a program, whatever, somebody rings up and gives you an important message, and you let it ring for quite a long time.
Tony.
Repetition of ring.
Yes, there was a repetition of ring. So, Tony, you needn't worry. You lost the subject, but you got in with only 3 seconds ago, having gained another point, and the subject is do's and don'ts of radio, starting now.
You really don't want doggy doos on radio. They are a distinct...
So Tony Hawk's getting points in the round, and also one for speaking as a whistle when gained, has moved forward, and he's now equal in the lead with Clement Freud. And Clement, it's your turn to begin. The subject, pow wow. That is the subject. Tell us something about it in this game, starting now.
It sounds like an email address and is one of the very few words that has 3 W's in it. It is actually a North American Indian chieftain, and in its verbal form, a sort of chat between such a powwow and his people. Powwow is some conversation of...
Kit has hesitation. There was a hesitation. Is hesitation, yes. 38 seconds, Kit. You tell us something about powwow, starting now.
You shall hear how Hiawatha called the elders of his village, Minnehaha, Laughing Water, Knobbling Kneecaps.
Clement Freud challenge. Laughing Kneecaps. Yes.
Repetition of ha.
I'm not sure it wasn't hyphenated, is it?
No, it's all one word. It's her name. Ha-ha.
Ha-ha. Yeah, but we work in the...
We might as well say powwow is repetition then.
No, that's 2 different words. Pow and begins with wow.
The ow is repeated.
No, we are working in the realm of sound, and that is correct, and it's a clever challenge. So, Clement, I must give it to you. A repetition of ha, 31 seconds, powwow, starting now.
Powwow has entered our language these days as the sort of chat between politicians, farmers, doctors...
Challenge.
We had chat before, didn't we?
Chats we had before.
Did we? I'm sorry.
Clement, another point. 24 seconds, powwow, starting now.
Will you come to my house after school for a powwow? I used to say to my friends many years ago. I have very few now. And some arrived, and we sat down and powwowed until the cows came home. We lived on a farm.
Kit Hesketh-Harvey challenge.
Repetition of ow. There was an ow in cow and an ow in powwow.
No, the only if the word... It's very clever of you, actually, to try and get back on hoist him on that particular petard, whatever it is. I'll give you a bonus point, because it was a very clever thought, but it wasn't correct within the rules of just a minute. So Clement has another point, and he has powwow still 9 seconds starting now.
I think that was actually one of the cleverest challenges that has not been taken.
So what was your challenge,
I think deviation. I think he'd clearly run out of things to say about powwow and was just talking about whether he was going to get challenged or not. And I think he was filling in, and I didn't want to see it happen.
I think he did deviate. He suddenly spoke to me, which was deviation from powwow. And anyway, he's got so many points in that round. You've got another one. You've got 3 seconds on powwow, Tony, starting now.
I once said to a slightly deaf business partner of mine, buy a powwow.
So at the end of that round, Clement Freud is in a strong lead. No, he's not as strong. He's in a lead, just ahead of Tony Hawk's. And then Kit Hesketh-Harvey and Peter Jones in that order. And there's still some points to be won. We have one more round. Kit Hesketh-Harvey is going to begin it because it's his turn. And the subject is the journey home. How apt for a final round. 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Well, as soon as this powwow is over, I shall head down the A47 through Dereham and Thetford Forest to Centre Parks, where I shall go round and round.
I think they were clapping the local allusions you were giving rather than the fact that you made a mistake and said round and round. Clement got in first, so Clement, you have a repetition of 45 seconds. Tell us something about the journey home, starting now.
I shall go to Norwich station and take an Anglia railway train. via Stowmarket and Ipswich, Manningtree, Colchester, Chelmsford, Brentwood, Liverpool Street, where a taxi will await me to take me to York House in Upper Montague, where I reside. This is in the City of London. The postal...
Kit Hesketh-Harvey challenge.
Is it in the City of London?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was near Wimpole Street.
Oh.
You're having a little private conversation, the two of you, sitting side by side, so we have to accept... So are you challenging, Kit?
I'm sorry, no, I thought it was deviation, but it's obviously not. Upper Montague is in the City of London.
Tony Hawk's challenge.
What number? I want you to put the kettle on. I'm coming round for a cup of tea.
So, Clement, you have another point. 17 seconds. The journey home starting now.
The postal code is W1H.
Peter Jones challenged.
That's not about the journey home. It's about the destination.
No, that is... That ringing applause endorses your correctness of your challenge, Peter. So you've got in with 12 seconds. You tell us something about your journey home, or actually the subject is the journey home, starting now.
Well, it can be the very best part of the evening. According to how you play your cards. Now, it can cause trouble, of course, and has done...
So Peter Jones, with that last flourish, brought that round to an end and also has brought the show to an end. He got an extra point for doing so, but alas, he finished up in 4th place. But he was only just behind Kit Hesketh-Harvey, who was only just a point or two behind Tony Hawks. But a few points out in the lead was Clement Freud. So Clement, we say, you are the winner this week. It only remains for me to say thank you to our 4 individual and talented players of the game, Tony Hawks, Peter Jones, Kit Hesketh-Harvey and Clement Freud. I also thank Janet Staplehurst for having helped me with the score, and also Chris Neal, our producer and director, who helps to try and keep us in order, and also the creator of the game. We thank him immensely, that is Ian Messiter, and also we thank this lovely audience here in Norwich who've come from different parts of Norfolk to egg us on our way. We hope you've enjoyed it. From me, Nicholas Parsons, from our players, from our audience, goodbye. Tune in next time we play the game. Bye.
That programme was recorded last November, prior to the death of Ian Messiter, who devised the programme.
Welcome to Just a Minute. Hello, my name is Nicholas Parsons, and as the minute waltz fades away once more, it is my pleasure to welcome our many listeners throughout the world to the show, but also to welcome the 4 diverse, dynamic and scintillating personalities who this week have gathered together to play Just a Minute. We welcome back one of our regular players of the game whose contribution we value so much, and that is Paul Merton. We welcome someone who hasn't played the game quite so often, but we welcome his contribution, which has always been so absolutely outstanding, and that is Stephen Fry. We welcome back one of the longest-standing players of the game, and that is Peter Jones. And we welcome someone bringing up the distaff side with her wonderful feminine, humorous charm, and that is Maria McCurlane. Would you please welcome all 4 of them? As usual, I am going to ask them to speak on a subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Beside me sits Janet Staplehurst, who is going to help me keep the score, and she will blow a whistle when the 60 seconds are up. And this particular edition of Just a Minute is coming from the Radio Theatre in the heart of Broadcasting House, quite near the centre of that great metropolis of London, where a lot of people have escaped from the crush to come in here and egg us on our way with a great enthusiasm. I'm confident of that. Let's begin. begin the show. Stephen Fry, will you take the first subject? It is laying it on with a trowel. 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
What do I know of that subject compared to our chairman, Nicholas Parsons' dynamic, diverse, scintillating talents, the warm, feminine humour on the distaff side, the teeming metropolis and egging us on. That's laying it on with a trowel. I believe the phrase, unless I'm much mistaken, comes from either As You Like It or Twelfth Night. It's certainly Shakespearean. I think it may be Touchstone or Feste who first described this euphuistic trope, I suppose one would call it, a hyperbolic mechanism of speech.
And Paul Merton has challenged
I'm
you.
not sure. He might be making up words. I don't know.
So, that euphemistic, I don't think it was
No,
quite
I didn't say euphemistic, I said euphuistic.
I know you did,
yes,
which
yes.
is a made-up word.
No, it isn't, no.
Is it?
No, it's a 16th century word. It describes the writings of writers like Lodge.
As it was an incorrect challenge, Stephen gets a point for an incorrect challenge, keeps the subject, and there are 33 seconds available. Laying it on with a trowel, Stephen, starting now.
The Right Honourable Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, MP, Prime Minister of our country for many years, of course, laid it on with the trowel both in the figurative and the literal senses because he was a bricklayer amongst his many other accomplishments, for instance, kicking German butt.
Did he say amongst his many other accomplishments?
He did.
Oh, did I?
This, you did say compliments.
Well, I'm a fool and I must be punished.
Paul has a correct challenge. He has 19 seconds. Laying it on with a trowel, Paul, starting now.
It's probably the best way to build a brick wall in the end is to get hold of a load of mortar, put it onto a trowel, place the particular substance I mentioned earlier onto a brick, then...
And Stephen, you challenge.
There's a couple of bricks.
Yeah, the 2 bricks. You dropped a brick there. Yes, Stephen's got in with a correct challenge for this and got the subject back and 7 seconds available. Laying it on with the trowel, Stephen, starting now.
I once laid it on with a towel, which is not nearly as recommendable as laying it on with a trowel.
Oh, Paul's challenged.
Deviation.
What? Yes.
Well, no, the subject's laying it on with a trowel, and he's
said-
talking about laying it on with a towel, which
I
is a
know.
completely different thing altogether.
I know.
More exciting, but
It's more
a different
exciting,
thing.
I know. Right now, it's 2 seconds. Paul, you have another point for a correct challenge. 2 seconds available. Laying it on with the trowel, starting now.
I want you to picture the scene. First of all, you must...
Whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains an extra point. On this occasion was Paul Merton. At the end of that round, you won't be surprised to discover that both Stephen Fry and Paul Merton are equal together in the lead because the other two haven't spoken yet. Peter Jones, will you take the next round? A lovely subject, cults. Would you tell us something about cults in just a minute, starting now?
Well, they usually have kind of some religious origin, and they've split off from the mainstream. And I know Kenneth Williams, God bless him, he used to use this word quite often, mostly in the singular. And he once described me as one of them. Well, I didn't... I didn't mind because he called me many things during the many years he was with us, and what a joyful man he was. And I don't say much more.
Paul Merton has challenged you.
Possible hesitation.
I think you're possibly correct, Paul. Yes, yes, and yes. Paul, a correct challenge. So you have the subject of cults. You have 19 seconds, starting now.
As Peter says, it was one of Kenneth Williams' catchphrases on this very programme. He used to say, I'm one of the biggest cults around here. You won't find a bigger one than me. And that was one thing he used to say all the time. And I used to love listening...
Stephen, you've challenged.
That's 2 used to says.
Used to say. Yes, indeed. So, Stephen, listening well, gain another point for a correct challenge. There's 9 seconds to tell us something about cults, starting now.
Moonies have always struck me as a pretty desperate cult, but the one that most irritates me are those Dianetic people following L. Ron Hubbard. I think they call themselves Scientologists.
Maria McCurlin, you've challenged.
It was a challenge because I thought there was only about 3 seconds left, and he did a hesitation. He hesitated
Absolutely
slightly.
right.
You did. I mean, he'd already admitted it, but it was a hesitation. But I wouldn't do it just because there's 3 seconds. But
Well, I was hoping to get the point, and you know how competitive
well, you've got
I
the
am.
point. You always have the point, Maria. And
Do I?
Good to have you on the show, yes. And it's a very pointed challenge, and you have the cults, and you have 3 seconds available, starting now. And Paul Merton's challenge.
I thought I'd challenge because there was only 2 seconds left.
Well, I think that's a very generous challenge because it was incorrect. And so Maria now has another point, and she has actually 2.5 seconds on cults starting now.
Paul Merton is a right cult, frankly.
Maria McCurlane was speaking as the whistle went then, gained that extra point for doing so, and she is now in second place behind our joint leaders, Paul Merton and Stephen Fry, and Peter Jones is pulling up the rear there. And Maria, it's your turn to begin, and the subject is knowing when to stop. Tell us something about that, Maria, in just a minute, starting now.
Knowing when to stop is very important, for instance, if you are driving a car or eating in a self-service restaurant. One of which could, of course, end up in an accident, the other in obesity and possibly death. Knowing when to stop breathing is very important not to do, or indeed...
Stephen, challenge.
It's two very importants there.
Yeah, it's very important, yes.
I'm a very important person, Stephen.
42 seconds available. Knowing when to stop, Stephen, starting now.
I believe I know that I should stop in 42 seconds, though I don't know quite how to fulfil the great yawning gap of time between then and now. I suppose I should point out that I've never really known when to stop. I've always been a rather excessive child. It's been my downfall on many
Peter Jones has challenged.
My suggestion is you stop.
What is the challenge within just a minute? You've got a good one, Peter, or not?
Well, I don't know. He was getting a bit... he seemed to have he had a kind of death wish about it all.
You have 30 seconds on telling us something about knowing when to stop, starting now.
I think it's the business of a bus driver to know when to stop. And there are signs all along our city streets showing him where it can be. And if you are a request customer, you hold your hand out into the middle of the road if you can, and he should stop. He usually does a few yards ahead of where it should be, or even some distance behind. And I get a bit better.
Paul Merton challenge.
This is all very controversial stuff, isn't it? Are we allowed to broadcast this kind of...
But you have a challenge within the rules of just a minute, Paul.
No, not really.
Peter, it was an incorrect challenge. And, Peter, you have 3 seconds more to go on, having gained a point, to tell us something, knowing when to stop.
If you're driving a bulldozer, of course, the same.
Maria, you challenged.
2 drivings. We had driving the bus.
You were having driving a bus.
And also only 2 seconds left.
Yes, he did say driving before. Maria, you have 1.5 seconds on knowing when to stop, starting now. And Paul is... No, Paul challenged before the whistle. Yes, Paul.
Hesitation.
Hesitation. He's lost her. He's obviously enamoured of you because he's sitting beside you, Maria, and he wants you to have another point. And you've got it because you did not hesitate. And you've now got 3/4 of a second on knowing when to stop, starting now.
Paul Merton is a cult.
So Maria McCurlane, with the help of Paul Merton, kept going to the whistle went, gained that extra point, and she's now in the lead at the end of that round. Paul, will you take the next round? The subject, agony aunts. Tell us something about those creatures, those ladies, those women, in just a minute, starting now.
I'll never forget the day my Aunt Nellie fell off the greenhouse. She broke her leg and she was in agony. She was rushed to hospital and they said, there's nothing we can do. She's going to have it taken off. And so, indeed, the surgeon sawed her particular limb off from... I've said off about 4 times.
I have it from the best authority that he said off about 4 times.
Yeah, that's right. So, Stephen, you have got the subject of agony aunts in 45 seconds, starting now.
When I was at school, I used to write letters with friends to agony aunts in newspapers, pretending to be a divorcee or a sex-changed mother or something like that, to see what...
Paul Merton challenge.
So you're Disturbed of Tunbridge Wells?
You've got it! I'm also hairy in surprising places of Ashby de la Zouche.
Right, so we don't score any points on that, but we did enjoy the fun. 36 seconds. Still with you, Stephen. Agony aunt, starting now.
Irma Kurtz, Claire Rayner, somebody called...
Merton challenge.
Hesitation.
No, that's her name. Her name is...
Does she get many letters?
Swedish. It's the pause as an accent.
30 seconds available now on agony aunts, Paul, starting now.
People say that you have agony aunts now in magazines because we have lost the extended family. If you were perhaps a distraught teenager, you could speak perhaps not to your parents but to an aunt.
Yes.
Oh, it was 2 perhapses.
There were 2 perhapses, I'm afraid, Paul. So,
yes.
First, back with you, Stephen. Agony Aunts, 19 seconds, starting now.
I suppose I should take up the cudgel of this extended family point. It is true that perhaps the function was performed before by priests and doctors, learned people of the village and so on, and now it's distance advice, isn't it? I said distance, right? It was a pretty naked repetition, wasn't it? That's shameful.
There's a big echo in this room.
There are 7 seconds for you, Paul, on Agony Aunt, starting now.
Dear Claire Rayner, I am having unnatural relationships with a goat at the end of my garden. What do you...
So at the end of that round, Paul Merton, speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point. He's equal with Miriam McCurlin, who is in second place, 1 point behind Stephen Fry. Peter Jones is bringing up the rear, and Stephen, it's your turn to begin, and the subject is now body language. Tell us something about that subject in this game, starting now.
My bottom speaks fluent German. My elbow is... Sorry, it's a bit of a challenge.
Oh, I'm sorry. What a new challenge.
You don't have to tell me, I heard it clear in its throat earlier.
Yes, it was a very guttural sound, you're quite right, yes. So, what is your... Any challenge within just a minute or not?
No, that was it. That was it. Human decency. Does that count for nothing these days?
No, actually, we won't allow it, Paul, but because Stephen was riding one of the biggest laughs we've had in just a minute, and deservedly so, because the image it conjured up was absolutely bizarre and delightful, and...
I never knew you cared.
I wouldn't say that the image of Stephen's bottom speaking German is necessarily delightful.
Body language is still with you, and we're waiting with great anticipation for the next comment. 52 seconds still available, Stephen, starting now.
Well, they say, don't they, that if you lie, you tend to touch your nose. And there are other corporal indications of untruth and certain mendacities and indeed attitudes, positions and so forth that the body can give away simply by gesture and performance in different manifestations. For example, you might cross your legs when sexually excited, but that's probably more functional than semiotic. I don't know. And there are various... I said various again, I'm sorry.
Stephen... You've actually challenged yourself.
Repetition. I said various.
What was your challenge?
I said various twice.
Well, that's a correct challenge, isn't it? So, so within the rules of just a minute, I suppose I'd say yes, a correct challenge, Stephen. Well listened. You get a point for a correct challenge. You keep the subject. 29 seconds are available on body language starting now.
29 seconds, he said, his arms stretching to either side of him to indicate disbelief at such a vast expanse of temporal habitude. I don't know. That makes no sense whatsoever. Oh, God, somebody interrupt me because I don't know what's going on.
Yes, Paul.
A mercy dash.
A mercy dash, right.
Bless you, Paul.
Right, we interpret that as hesitation. Paul, you've got body language. You have 17 seconds, starting now.
There is a man called Bobby McFerrin who does various cabaret acts. He hits his body with his hands and sings at the same time, and it's like a curious acoustic that he manages to get from his chest cavity, and it's the most amazing performance when you listen to it on CD.
Maria McCurlin challenge.
No, I didn't.
Oh, sorry, Peter Jones. Peter Jones, I'm sorry, your light came on. I was looking at Maria, it was rather difficult, you see, so I automatically assumed it was her light. It wasn't, it was yours, Peter. What was your challenge?
Repetition of amazing.
It was amazing, yes, indeed.
Was it really?
Yes, yes. And Peter, you've got in with 1 second to go. Well, listen, on body language starting now.
Well, I can't make any sound.
So Peter Jones was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so. He's still in 4th place, but he's moving forward. And Maria, it's your turn to begin, and the subject now is playing it by ear. 60 seconds as usual, playing it by ear, starting now.
Playing it by ear is not something Vincent van Gogh was really able to do, or indeed Ludwig van Beethoven, or
Stephen Fred.
2 vans.
2 vans. Oh, dear.
It's like Pickford's round here.
52 seconds with you, Stephen. Another point as well of playing it by ear, starting now.
I can't play much by ear. I can pick out a little bit of the national anthem, the Marseillaise, or, of course, the prelude in F-sharp minor on the piano by ear, but not much more than that.
Peter Jones's challenge.
There was a definite in the middle of that
I
sentence.
know, it was such a...
No, I'm saying ear. It's on the card, ear.
No, there was an in between.
No, it was ear. I took a Welsh accent, playing it by ear.
Well struggled, Stephen, but no, I think I can...
Welsh?
Yes, that's true.
I'm going to give you, Peter, the benefit of the doubt and say, yes, there was a hesitation. 35 seconds for you, Peter, on playing it by ear, starting now.
Well, I can't play it by ear because I'm actually tone deaf, which is one of the many disadvantages I have as a performer. The other is not being able to see very well and not being able to read a script without hesitation. And apart from the fact that I have some questionable relatives, I don't think I am really qualified to be in this business at all. And it's something of a miracle that I've managed to survive for so long. I mean, it's not all that long.
So, in spite of his hesitations, Peter Jones kept going till the whistle went, gained that extra point for doing so, and he has leapt forward. But he's still in fourth place. But he's only just behind Maria McCurlane, who is only just behind Paul Merton, who's 1 point behind Stephen Fry, our leader. And, Paul, your turn to begin. The subject is the best excuse, starting now.
I used to go to school with a boy called Stephen Pendry, who was habitually late every day, and he would come into the classroom and tell the teacher a whole catalogue of different excuses. I remember once he said, "I'm sorry I wasn't here for the beginning of the lesson, but I caught my foot in a drain." On another occasion, he claimed there'd been an explosion.
Peter, you challenge.
The repetition of occasion.
Yes.
Was there?
Yes, it was. So, Peter, well, listen, 38 seconds are available for you to tell us something about the best excuse, starting now.
It's always difficult to find an excuse if there's some event which you don't want to attend and would prefer to stay at home. And the best of all these excuses is to die. Nobody can really argue with that. You just will not be there because you've gone to some better place, which in many cases would be true, particularly if it's an occasion which you don't want to be at.
Peter Jones was then speaking as the whistle went and gained that extra point for doing so. And it's your turn to begin. And the subject is filleting fish. Talk on the subject if you can, Peter. 60 seconds starting now.
It's very important to fillet the fish if you want filleted fish, because they have to get...
Maria McKernan challenge.
Well, he said something funny, like filleted.
Well, he was trying to emphasise the fact that the subject is filleting fish, and he would then, let's say, doesn't repeat that word, he repeated filleted. Peter, an incorrect challenge. 53 seconds available on filleting fish, starting now.
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh,
And Paul, you challenge.
Hesitation.
No, he didn't hesitate. He actually said me. He didn't hesitate. There was no gap there. He said straight into me. I nodded. He was about to go and you
Don't get yourself into a lather about it. Incorrect challenge, Peter. You have the point.
But you don't realise, Stephen, you don't play it as much as some of the regulars. They get passionate about getting their points. Peter, you are still filleting fish, and 51 seconds are still available to you, starting now.
If you successfully get all the bones out of it, then you can make fish fingers, or even kipper fillets, which are an inferior type of smoked fish. But what else?
Oh, Stephen, you challenge.
There was a bit of erring going on there.
I think there was, Stephen. Yes, you have 38 seconds. You tell us something about filleting fish, starting now.
I suppose smelly fingers are an occupational hazard to the fish filleted. Nothing much you can do about that. You can wear gloves, no doubt. Filleting fish is quite an art. I've tried to do it myself. Not easy. You go to a restaurant, you ask for something off the bone, and you watch them pulling off the spine from the soul or something.
Paul Merton challenge.
Very harsh. 2 offs, but in quick succession.
True.
Yeah, they're true.
Really quick offs.
You tell us something about filleting fish. There are 23 seconds available, Paul, starting now.
Well, I don't really enjoy filleting fish because I think it's cruel.
Maria McCurlane challenged.
Well, he just sort of stopped.
Yeah, that's hesitation.
That's all I had to say on the subject.
And you were the first in there, Maria, so you have the
succinct.
subject of filleting fish and 16 seconds starting now.
A few years ago, I was working for Buckingham Palace in the kitchens, and I was filleting fish and didn't do a very good job because the Queen Mother choked on something that I apparently had left in, and I was fired immediately and had to take up a career in show business, which I'm very...
Paul Merton challenge.
Did you say a career in show business?
How cruel can you get?
Deviation. No, deviation. You have never worked at Buckingham Palace.
No, that is actually a very generous challenge because it's incorrect. Because it shows that Maria, I believe, is in show business and excelling stuff.
Deviation. I'm saying she's never worked at Buckingham Palace. Not that she's in show business.
In my own little head, I've worked in...
Oh, well, in your own little head. How are we going to play this game then if in our own little head is allowed?
I think you said something first before that.
No.
Didn't you? All right. It was only half a second. Who do I give it to, Maria or Paul?
Give it to Maria.
Right, Maria, you've got half a second.
I don't want it.
Fillet.
Well, I'll have it then.
Paul, half a second. Filleting fish starting now.
Kippers are wonderful.
Right. So it's pretty even now. In fact, only 1 point it separates all four of them.
It's nip and tuck.
Nip and tuck, yes. And
Even
even Stevens, whatever you... Not quite even Stevens yet. So it's still anybody's game for those interested in the points. Well, the humour, I think, is more valuable. And there are 60 seconds once again.
Rarer.
And not when you're around, Stephen, I can assure you. Lifting the lid is the subject. Paul Merton, it's your turn to begin, and you start now.
Pandora's box was a bit of a mistake, wasn't it, when somebody peeped inside it and let all the evil out into the world? I once had a marvellous jam jar at home that was full of frog spawn, and I wanted to look in the lid, and I don't know why I particularly wanted to lift the lid up.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Repetition of wanted.
That's right.
You're not confident, though, are you?
No.
Well, when it goes out, we'll see if you're right or wrong.
Why would you keep French pornography in a jam jar?
Frog spawn.
Frogs. Oh.
Oh, I see.
That's rich coming from somebody whose bottom speaks German.
Right. Peter, you have the subject of lifting the lid and 46 seconds available starting now.
Well, it's something that you should not lift very far and immediately put it down again, particularly if you're sitting next to Stephen Fry.
She stopped. Right, Paul?
Hesitation.
Yes, there was. He came to a full stop. So, Paul, you've got in. Sorry.
Yeah, carry on.
35 seconds. Lifting the lid starting now.
Edgar Allan Poe, the famous American story writer, wrote several tales concerning people... Oh.
Stephen, you challenge.
A little bit of hesitation.
Yes,
I wanted to get to premature burial, but I couldn't think of a way to do it.
Yes, right. Yeah. 27 seconds. Lifting the lid starting now.
During the daytime, you lift the lid, and there is the whitened face, glittering. You raise the crucifix and the wooden stake, hammer it through the heart, and lo, Dracula is dead. Or is he? He always seems to come back. You lift the lid, stab him, do it again.
Maria McKernane.
Oh, sorry, no, I just don't like Stephen very much.
That's fair.
I really didn't have a chance.
He's very good at the game.
No, I thought he said lifting the lid, and of course that's the subject.
I know, it's the subject.
I nodded off momentarily.
For those who haven't already spotted it, you can repeat the subject on the card within reason. So, Maria, incorrect challenge, alas. Stephen still has it. Lifting the lid, 10 seconds, starting now.
Maria has lifted the lid on a very sad thing. I thought she loved me. She told me so earlier, and I believed we had something going, some belief.
Maria has challenged.
He's suffering from delusions.
Maria, we enjoyed the challenge, and the two fellows are equal in the lead. So would it not be a very fair way, Stephen, to say, let Maria take the last 2 seconds of this subject?
No, it would be patronising.
These modern women, you can't please them, can you?
So Maria doesn't want it. I'm sorry, that could be...
Lucky to be in a position to choose.
She's got 3 or 4 of us up here. Right,
Only 3, I fear.
And so, I don't
I'm
think
sure I can make you jump the fence, Stephen.
I don't think I can
With my trick pelvis and other such wily ways.
I don't think I can extricate myself from that one, so I think we shall press on with just a minute and lifting the lid, and we'll finish in a sort of blaze of glory with Stephen Fry talking for 2 seconds on the subject, starting now.
Lifting on the lid, what is
Maria, you did actually challenge before the whistle went.
Well, because he just went...
Hesitation. Maria, you have half a second on lifting the lid, starting now.
Boys never lift the lid.
Oh, what a lovely fair way to finish. With that last point that Maria McCurlane got when the whistle went, she is now equal in second place with Peter Jones, but they are 4 or 5 points behind our joint leaders, Stephen Fry and Paul Merton. So we say, Paul and Stephen, you are our winners this week. It only remains for me to say thank you to our 4 fine exponents of this difficult game, which is Paul Merton, Stephen Fry, Peter Jones and Maria McCurlane. I also thank Janet Staplehurst for the way she has helped me keep the score. I'm blowing her whistle so magnificently. Also to thank our producer and director, Chris Neal, who keeps us all in control as best he can, and also the creator of the game, Ian Messiter, who makes sure that we all keep in work, and also this delightful audience here at the Radio Theatre in the Broadcasting House. From them, from me, from our players, and me, Nicholas Parsons, thank you. Tune in next time we take to the air and we play Just a Minute. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.